Good evening. This is Ronald Allen, Managing Change on Facebook Live or Facebook Chat Live. Today's discussion, why the dragonfly? Many of you may know the significance of the butterfly, the monarch to be specific. And what is even more interesting, good evening, Stephanie, excuse me. Thank you for joining in. We're talking about why the dragonfly. And the discussion today came about because as we go back and repurpose our publishing arm, Dragonfly Publishing out of New York, we've managed to partner with a small publishing house that is somewhat self-published. At the same time, we're located there in Rockefeller Center. So we're looking for some, credibility, as they say. And many people have asked me, why do you use the dragonfly as your symbol or logo, graphic design, for the publishing side? Well, first and foremost, the dragonfly has developed through 3 stages of evolution. And as you know, when we talk about managing change, that is what we're really engaged in. We are introduced to the world. We are shown certain preferences, social, cultural, religious, educational. And then we get to a stage, we hope to get to a stage, we should be at a stage where we design and develop our own path. That is the 3 stages. And then most importantly, which is unique to humans, we can infuse meaning and therefore direction and solidify that through our actions as we get older and we travel around the sun more times. So today's discussion, why the butterfly? Good evening, Miles. Thank you very much for checking in with us here this evening. So the reason why we're talking about the dragonfly is because the dragonfly is one of the unique insects that goes through 3 stages. It is born in water, in aqua, right? Which many of us, most animals are, right? Not all, but most. Then it matures and becomes surface land born. What is unique is that it cannot really feed and defend and reproduce itself unless it is airborne. And that is what is so unique. So it goes through 3 phases. The reflection is, what phases are you going through? How are you navigating your life changes? Good afternoon, Christopher. Thank you very much for checking in with us. So what phases are you going through? And with the dragonfly, it doesn't have a choice. It has to go through because, in fact, the ultimate challenge is it cannot eat unless it's catching its prey in air. So when you talk about challenges, when you talk about must-dos, have-dos, how we're programmed, understand that this is an insect that is very adapted, and we'll talk about how its anatomy is developed, and how we can use some of this observed, hardwired mandate on its very existence for our benefit. One of the other advantages is if you are catching your prey in the air, you've minimized competition, right? How many animals do that? We know that there are certainly certain reptiles have the long tongue. I'm thinking of the eyes. I'm forgetting the name of that guy. Absolutely incredible, beautiful animal. Its tongue shoots out 2, 3, 4 times its length of its body. Yet the dragonfly can maneuver, has dual wings, if you will. And in the West Indies, we refer to them as batty mamselle, which kind of summarizes it nicely. As it moves like a butterfly, but it moves on purpose. It's very directional, very focused. It's avoiding prey, birds, and while positioning itself to strike smaller insects. So we thought of that because in managing change and in certainly the writings that we will continue to develop, and we have 3 simple books. One's a quote book, one's a quote book exercise book. The first one is Life Cycles, And if you look at the cover, you'll see that there's a reptile. And we've used the earth as its eye, and then the reptile design of the skeleton, the head. The second book is called 113 Reasons to Read These Quotes. And the reason we said that in terms of the dragonfly, using that as the metaphor, is as you read the quotes, you then get to hear my perspective, you read my perspective, and most importantly, you get to write down yours. Now, you can think of yours, that's fine, that's great. The writing down solidifies the thinking that makes the proposition that this is my experience, this is my perspective, all the more real. And again, because being humans, we can then adjust, we can change that, right? So here we go. We've got someone else calling in. Thank you very much, Ken. So the observation, if you will, is that the dragonfly has a number of qualities that forces it to behave and survive, and we can begin to adapt those for ourselves. The head, for example, is 80% eye. So how can we use that to our advantage? Well, our eyes are facing forward, which is a predatory, by the way. Every animal that's a predator, you'll notice in nature, the eyes are forward looking. And in our case, we have a 180 peripheral vision. If you take your fingers, take your fingers, and I know I see them in the camera, but if you take your fingers and bring them forward slowly, don't look left or right, but you will notice where they are. Take them back, and it's pretty much 180. That's a predatory view. Now with the dragonfly, since it can see 360, how do we compensate for that? Our ears, our sense of movement of the air itself. If you've ever had a cat come up to you and it's breathing on you, you can feel it, right? Well, if you give yourself the time, you will develop the audio, your ears, and you can hear things. You use that in coordination with your eyes, you become that much more aware of your environment. It's not so much that you have to be aware of an attack. It's just your sensory of the environment you're in. You know, you heard us say that the victim is the person that doesn't understand the environment they're in. So as we go through life, go through our careers, go through our relationships, and we're not in tune, we're not actively engaging as the dragonfly's eyes are constantly moving, right? They're looking, observing, focusing, depth, distance. Those are skill sets. Those are unique to ourselves that we can develop and use in the marketplace of life. So I wanted to also share with you some observations from around the world and over time. Because the interesting thing about information and knowledge is that not only as you accumulate it, it becomes useful, and then of course we have to talk about applying it. Moreover, knowledge and its context changes based on our needs. So here am I'm fully clothed. I don't have to worry so much about the outside weather. Make sure my house has heat, make sure the rooms, the boilers, the radiators are working. On the other hand, if I'm more exposed living outside, and certainly at a time man was naked, then our senses have to be that much more acute. So no, we're not going to go back to necessarily being naked out in public. We'd get locked up. On the other hand, we can use that knowledge and say, how can I better prepare for the environment that I'm exposed to? The beautiful thing about managing change is that we are engaging for our benefit, gambits, structuring, observing, and then adapting or modifying those capabilities that we see. So we'll talk about the double wingspan. Well, we don't have wings, right? We can't fly. On the other hand, we can understand how that insect does fly, and could we adapt it in aerial craft, such as the butterfly. Our physics at one time could not explain why the mass of a bumblebee and the displacement of the wings, would allow the bumblebee to fly. At one time, our physics could not explain that. And then we learned that it is the displacement of the wings as quickly as they move that allows the bumblebee to fly. So what can we do in our lives? When you see someone acting out, do you have to react? When you recognize someone that you love behaving in a way that's perhaps not beneficial, do we immediately go in and correct them? So our senses, that ability to see things from multiple sides. Good evening, Stephen. Thank you very much for checking in this evening with Managing Change on Facebook Live Chat. We're talking about why the dragonfly. So when you see that dragonfly with the eyes pivoting and watching and observing, are you doing the same in context to the environment you experience? Think about it. You're driving down the road today. Everyone goes home. Well, not everyone goes home, but many of us will get home safely tonight. And you will have observed people in their cars acting out. Why don't you move when the light turns green? Why are you cutting me off? Why don't you allow me to go on the shoulder, even though the sign says no driving on the shoulder? Do we have to always be engaged? Where were we today? I think it was a lobby. Oh, it was a garage. It was a garage. And they have a huge TV so that the patrons, we park in our cars, could watch TV while the attendant goes and gets a car. Why? So you say to yourself, well, what has that got to do with the dragonfly? Well, the dragonfly is only interested in what it needs. It doesn't need all this other noise. It doesn't need all this other drama, all this other distractions, because if it does, a bird might get it. And birds go after dragonflies. So what can hurt us if we're not paying attention? Well, if you watched, for example, an individual who is a pedophile, and he's put away for about 170 odd years now, if you watch that and focus on that, does that really benefit you? I mean, we can get into a whole conversation about that, right? 20 years and now they're catching him. 20 years and the authorities in the sports arena only now realize that he was preying on the young innocence of children who are excellent in their sports. So we look at managing change in its broadest capacity. Good evening, Johnny. Thank you very much for checking in with us tonight. We look at the broadest applications of what is around us, what we come in contact with, and how we can interpret, repurpose things that we see. And the dragonfly is very unique because, again, it has 3 stages of development: water-based, water surface, land-based, and then it must get into the air because it feeds in that fashion. There are a couple of other much larger creatures that do the same thing. The bald-headed eagle. Not only does it capture its prey in the air, it mates in the air. So again, the competition is reduced. How many can mate? How many can feed in the air? How do we separate ourselves? We separate ourselves by not always having to respond to every nuance, every conversation, every expressed frustration. Like a horse, we put on blinders for that purpose. So when we're in the workplace and an employee comes in and they're frustrated and annoyed, take them to a quiet place. If you see a colleague who perhaps is not behaving in their best interests, take a moment. Maybe express your frustration of a similar incident before you ask them what's going on. You diffuse, and you can diffuse, what could otherwise escalate. Mediators and arbitrators are very good at that. Here's another quick perspective. What if, and those 2 areas, mediation, arbitration, have nothing to do with you? What could you learn, though, from spending a little time and reading and studying those areas, those disciplines? At this stage in the United States, we could all certainly benefit from that. Not negotiation, that's slightly different, or significantly different. Moreover, mediation, arbitration. And then read up on some case studies. Now, getting off track a little bit, we're talking about the dragonfly, right? Also, the dragonfly, very slim, very cylindrical, right? Very little to hold it down, weigh it down. Do you take on baggage in your life? Do you need or feel that you are a fixer, right? An amiable type person who likes to fix things? So I'm not going to tell you not to be that way. Absolutely not. That would be ridiculous. What I will ask you to consider is test what you've been doing all this time, a week, a month, a year, your life. Identify with what objectives and goals you have in mind. And if you have none, why not set a few that are leveraged, that are significant for you, that will give you the kind of response, some people call it lifestyle, some people call it outcomes that you want, and then begin to work on a daily basis. How could you use the simplicity of the thorax and the tail of the dragonfly in your world? How could you let go? Here's a classic one. In the late 90s, and now certainly now, you see all these pods on people's lawns. So you have a house, people with an apartment, we could kind of understand. The same premise holds. They have these pods on their front lawn. And maybe a family member had to come back. Maybe a friend is staying with them and they've put their belongings in the pod. Understandable. On the other hand, because we own our home, I say, if it can't fit in the house, we don't need it. We don't need it. Don't need the basement full, don't need the attic full. That is also, by the way, psychologically saying that I need to stuff things in. I need to own. So again, we look at outside elements, and we're looking at the dragonfly because that is our symbol for our publishing arm, Dragonfly Publishing. And we say, how do we interpret that? Again, some of you might even say, well, big deal. What's the deal? Well, Twitter has a bird, and it's a particular kind of bird. Symbolism. Eli Lilly has a certain design, right? Look at the importance of symbolism, how it has meaning to the founders, stakeholders of a business, of a tribe. And I mentioned I want to share with you, I've got some stuff up here on the website. I'm going to kind of segue into that at this stage. That symbolism is very important. And many of us now subscribe our identity to external elements, right? I am on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook. I am on Facebook. Facebook Live Chat. It's a great platform. Notice how I mention our discussions, managing change, Facebook Live Chat, right? If you go and Google my name, Ronald M. Allen, you'll also see the Managing Change newsreel. It's curated articles about leadership, about management, and also about international perspectives on these topics of personal and professional development. Oh, wait a minute. Isn't that branding? So there you have it. I'm going to kind of stop here, but I want to mention that in Sweden, folklore talks about the dragonfly as, because of the imaginative elements that it presents. When you see a dragonfly, it's very thin, it's very fast, it's incredible turquoise colors, very infused, very dynamic colors. And then you see the double wings, right? Isn't that very imaginative? Isn't that very creative, right? In Australia, they look at the dragonfly as the meaning of life. When a child is born, they hope a dragonfly will fly over it because they believe it's a spiritual experience. Why is it that we have to go to a building? And I'm not going to go too far on this because I could annoy a few people. That's okay. That's what discourse is all about. Disagreement and understanding. Why do we have to go to a building to get our spiritual enrichment? I'm not going to say any more. I said I wouldn't. Native American, that's another one I have a challenge with. How can they be native if they came before? Leave it alone. But the Zuni tribe looked at the dragonfly in terms of harvest. Now that's interesting. Think about it. The dragonfly comes out at a certain time of the year, eats plentifully, and then goes away. Now, many of you might say, well, what's the significance? I just go to the supermarket, 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't even have to go to the supermarket. I go to the corner. I got Wawas all over the place, and then I got bodegas all over the place, and I got super duper stores like the Rite Aid International and the Walmart, and my goodness, Amazon. Forget about it. I don't have to leave the house. Stuff comes to me. That's the problem. The reason why I say it's a problem is because we don't have any balance. The dragonfly has eyes because it must watch for prey going to eat it. The dragonfly moves so that it can position itself to strike at prey. The dragonfly is smooth, cylindrical, very fast, very agile. Well, we can also look at IT with the very term agile principles. There are 12 agile principles. So this is not abstract. It's not just a philosophical way of looking at things. It is taking a perspective, seeing how we can interpret it and make it meaningful for us, and then acting out accordingly, as we say, antennae, right? Touching, feeling. What is the response in life that we get from this behavior, this adaptive behavior? Because as we go forward in life, millennials and certainly younger adults, I call them young adults because they're exposed to so much quicker than I certainly was. They must learn to be like a dragonfly. They must learn to be agile. And they look and we look at the components of other life forms, and we see how can we adapt, how can we use. Look at your military might in any country, and you'll see that they follow and use much, whether it's a bat with stealth technology, whether it's a hovercraft pulling up straight, many animals can jump up high, whether it's the tongue shooting out with precision, right, locked on targets. Broaden your perspective of your understanding of things, and I guarantee you'll find more meaningful resolve to the challenges that you have in life. So, we don't want to go too far, don't want to go too long. It's a short, quick Managing Change Facebook Live chat each day. Today's was talking about the dragonfly. Why the dragonfly? And our ability to see and adapt some of its capabilities for ourselves. So this is Ronald Allen, Managing Change. You know where to find me.